What up YouTube, it is Misery Hits Company, and in today's video we are bringing you a completely updated tier list for 5-star legendary gems. I get a request for this at least once a day in my YouTube comments, and well, it's finally time for me to do it, and we're going to make sure we do it right this time, and I'll show you why. So we're going to be using Tier List Maker, which is something I always use, but we're also going to be using the brand new Diablo Immortal Tools, or di-tools.info/legendary gems, which is a pretty fantastic tool to use to see what it will cost to upgrade your legendary gems, your 5-star legendary gems, or 2-star or 1-star, so you can truly see that it takes you 4,450 magic dust and 74 legendary 5-star legendary gems of whatever it is you're trying to get to rank 10 in order to get a legendary 5-star gem to rank 10. Now we're going to be talking about what this looks like in terms of a fully maxed out. You can see the different rank doesn't actually do you anything except increase the combat rating or the resonance, but we're going to be looking at all of the legendary gems at rank 10 to truly make the best tier list possible. Now first things first, the first one on our list is good old-fashioned Blessing of the Worthy. So at rank 10, it increases your resonance by 1,000, 240 combat rating, blah blah blah. When you take damage, you have a 20% chance to unleash retribution on all nearby enemies, dealing damage equal to 28% of your current life, and decrease all damage you take by 16% for 6 seconds. Cannot occur more often than 20 seconds. Now I don't remember where I put this originally on my tier list, but off the bat, and we could adjust based off how some of these go, but Blessing of the Worthy is not a terrible gem. It's actually pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and put it at B tier. I think it's a really good defensive gem that does a pretty decent explosion for okay damage. Yeah, okay damage. So we're gonna call this sort of the streamline, the median of all of the different legendary gems available to us. Now, moving on, we have Bottled Hope. So Bottled Hope, which is at rank 10, when you use a skill to grant a buff, increase the damage and movement speed of the target by 24% for 6 seconds. Cannot occur more often than once every 20 seconds per target. Skill cooldowns decrease by 6%. This is and has been a very, very good legendary gem for a long time. I want to say I had this at A tier previously when I made this video forever ago, but now considering what it is at rank 10 and decreases your skill cooldowns, I'm going to go ahead and put this at an S tier. Bottled Hope is a very, very good legendary gem. Better than the Blessing of the Worthy, and probably comparable to some of the other ones, which is a great transition to Blood-Soaked Jade, which is what we are working on next. So we look at Blood-Soaked Jade. Increases all damage you deal by up to 24% while at full life, with a maximum or minimum bonus of 12% while at low life. Increase your movement speed by 10%. Additionally, take 8% decreased damage while below 50% life. Now again, you don't get some of this until the different ranks, so I think at rank 5 that one's not there. Maybe it is. Interesting. The more you know. So it goes up. Blood-Soaked Jade is, and by far it has been, a S tier legendary gem since it came out, which was on day 1 of the game. Very, very good legendary gem. Now Chip of the Stone Flesh is one that I typically sleep on, but let's look at it at rank 10. So when you cause an enemy total loss of control, you also inflict an explosive curse. When the curse expires, enemy will explode for 45% of all damage taken during the duration, up to maximum of 450% base damage. Cannot occur more often than once every 20 seconds. Damage taken by the victim of the explosive curse increased by 24%. So they take an increased 24% damage while under your loss of control, which is pretty sick. That's a lot of damage. And then they also do an explosion based off 45% of all damage they take, which is just under half of the damage they take during that time they explode, which is kind of insane. I originally had Chip of the Stone Flesh pretty low, but after reading it at rank 10, I think this is more of a tier gem. What separates it from an A tier into an S tier, in my personal opinion, which this whole video is my opinion, guys, I think it's because it does require total loss of control. Now, it doesn't necessarily call out well in all skills what causes total loss of control, but I think a lot of skills do, but not all skills do. If this was, if it did damage, caused this effect to happen, then it would be S tier. It'd be so good, so strong. But because you have to do total loss of control, and there's ways of mitigating it or dodging total loss of control, I don't feel as great, but it is such a good gem if you get that total loss of control on them. So I'm gonna go ahead and rank A. Now we have concentrated will. So, using a dash skill, calls a guardian angel to your aid, unleashing a blast of holy light in your direction, dealing 135% damage plus 547 damage to all enemies in its path. When the guardian angel returns in the high heavens, it blesses you, increasing your damage and movement speed by 16% for 2 seconds. Cannot occur more often than once every 6 seconds. Now again, this 2 second, I'm assuming, will then be extended by Vithus and things like that because it is buffing you. So any beneficial effect duration will help increase this amount of time, which is important to note. And then the cooldown is only 6 seconds, which isn't bad, but you do have to use a dash skill. And again, very similar to Chip of the Stone Flesh, not all classes have an EG dash skill. For example, my teleport as a wizard, I believe, does count as a dash skill. In fact, I'm like 99% positive that it does, because I think I've tested this when this gem first came out. So, but not all classes do, and as somebody who bounces around to different classes, that can be a deterrent. It's also one of the cheaper gems on the market, which means that a lot of people could have it to help boost the resonance and combat rating. But Concentrated Will, I feel like, is another good gem, but because not all classes utilize dash, and like for me, for example, I don't always use teleport. So if I don't have teleport on, I have no means of activating this. So for that reason, I'm going to put it at B tier. I think it's a solid gem, but because it requires you to have a dash skill as one of your skills, if it's not part of your primary build, then you're literally losing out on this altogether. So my opinion there. Echoing Shade is next. So your attacks have a 15% chance to summon a shadow clone for 20 seconds that gains some of your abilities. You can now have up to 3 shadow clones at one time, and their life is increased by 100%. So they get some of your abilities and they do some amount of damage to you. I used to really, really love this skill. I love it less, but I don't think it's bad. It's borderline B for me, but it could go down to C. Like, it's again, one of these gems that it just, depending on your market, sometimes it's max value and sometimes it's incredibly low value. To me, I had this at one point and utilized it for a long time. I think the damage is very negligible compared to other legendary gems. So I'm going to put it for C for now, and we'll see if that changes here later on. Frozen Heart. This legendary gem used to get absolutely shit on for the longest time until people realize how good defense is in the game, because if everything does damage, then everyone has high damage, but not everything gives you defense. So Frozen Heart, increase when you take damage, activate a frigid shield for 6 seconds that chills enemy attackers and absorbs damage equal to 360% of your base damage plus 1,458 damage. That's a lot of damage. Frigid Shield also grants your attack a 60% chance to chill enemies. Cannot gain Frigid Shield more often than once every 20 seconds. It lasts for 6 seconds, cooldown's 20 seconds, but then also, so it's only a 14-second, time of not having it up. And it's anytime you take damage. Okay. Frigid Shield also grants your attacks a 60% chance to chill enemies, which isn't bad. I think this is actually one of the better legendary gems. I think defense is severely underrated and underutilized in terms of legendary gems. Gosh, am I going to put this at A tier? It's not an S tier. I will say that straight up. If Frozen Heart is not an S tier gem, but it is good, especially for PvP. Ooh, see, this is where it gets a little tough. This is only really good for PvP. I don't think this is great for PvE unless you're concerned about dying a lot, which you probably aren't unless you're pushing challenge rifts and you're pushing your raids. It's not all that often that you should be dying in PvE, unless again that high-end content. So I think for that reason alone, I'm going to bump it down to B. I think it's if this was only a PvP tier list for 5-star legendary gems, I think I would put it A. But because it's both, and this is just general ranking of all 5-star legendary gems, no matter where they're good, I bumped this down to B because of that. The defense is really, really nice, but yeah, hurts a little bit. Now we're moving on to Gloomcast. So your primary attacks unleash an aspect of gloom for 6 seconds, during which time your primary attacks will trigger gloom blades that deal 68% base damage plus 270 5 damage. Enemies hit by the gloom blades take 24% damage increase from your primary attacks for 3 seconds. Cannot occur more often than once every 20 seconds. So they deal damage for you, the blades, as well as make the target take more damage from your primary attacks, which again, your primary attacks is likely going to be your #1 damage source when you go to the training dummy and just practice your damage. And does have a cooldown of 20 seconds. And again, it lasts for 6 seconds, likely buffed then again by that of beneficial effect duration. So could go up. I love Gloom Cask, and again, in my opinion, it's a phenomenal gem. Gosh, but where do I want to put it? Also, I'm missing some of the new ones. What? I need to put the new ones on there. All right, so Gloomcast is going to go to S tier for me. It's very easy to trigger. It can be triggered by any and all classes. Its damage is consistent and predictable because there's no % chance that it happens. Anytime you do damage on a 20-second cooldown, basically, you're going to activate it, and it makes you do more damage to the target. This is good for PvE and PvP pretty easily. So for that reason alone, S tier gem. All right, I added the rest of the new gems that weren't on there. Now let's go to Hellfire. Hellfire Shard. What is it called? Hellfire Fragment. So using a skill conjures 3 Hellfire blazes around you you to seek out enemies within 6 yards, exploding on them, dealing 108% base damage plus 510 damage to all nearby enemies. Enemies struck by multiple Hellfire blazes take 50% additional damage from subsequent hits. Cannot occur more often than once every 20 seconds. This gem is really, in my opinion, only good for boosting your resonance. The damage is mediocre at best. It's mediocre in PvE, it's mediocre in PvP, it's just not good. I think straight up, it's a C gem, borderline D even. So not impressed by this gem. Again, I had it at rank 5 at one point because of the only reason that it was cheap to utilize in terms of the market value. So that's why I had it at one point. But the damage alone is just not good. And 6 yards is very close, very close. Now we're using Howler's Call. This is one of the gems that I had slept on accident for not looking at what they were at rank 10. So your primary attacks have a 10% chance to summon a charging spirit wolf that inflicts 360% base damage plus 1,458 damage to all enemies in its path, has a 48% chance to stun enemies for 3 seconds, cannot occur more often than once every 20 seconds. Now, my main problem with this gem, and it always has been, is that it's only your primary attacks that can trigger it, and even then, it's only a 10% chance of it happening. Outside of that, the damage is very, very good, and you can stun them. So, but it has a 48% chance when it does happen to stun them, which means 10% chance it even triggers, and then in that 10% chance that it triggers, which means 90% of the time it won't trigger, half the time it'll stun someone. I think it's a very good gem. It's going to go higher on my list than it did originally, but still that 10% chance is so low compared to a Gloomcast, which is always up. Same with the Bloodsoaked Jade. It's good damage, but it's low chance. I originally had this at like a D. I'm going to bump it up to B because it is so good and such high damage and you can stun them. But again, the 10% just really holds me back. If this was changed or increased, it would be much higher. Or if this was tailored to just a Demon Hunter or a primary attack build wizard, you could bump this up in rating. But if we're looking at all classes, all the time, for all game modes, I think it's appropriate at B, in my opinion. I also don't know why Mother's Lament's on there, so we're going to ignore that. Phoenix Ashes. We all know what this does, but just in case it does anything different. Prevents fatal damage and then grants a shield for 6 seconds that absorbs damage equal to 1050% of your base damage. When the shield expires, heal for 80% of the remaining value, cannot occur more often than once every 180 seconds. Wait, what? Okay, I missed this first part, the prevent fatal damage. I was like, doesn't it keep you alive? But anyway, again, good for PvP. But now that we have pets that can do this for us, there's other classes that have this, that can, the barbarian, the necromancer can do it themselves. The value of this gem has dropped significantly. And it's not even cheap to get on the market anymore. Honestly, it's going to C tier, borderline D. I'm not a fan of this gem at all. Now let's go on to Seeping Bile. This is where I piss people off, and I'm sorry in advance. Your attacks have a 4. Can we just pause there? A 4% chance. 4 Now, again, it's all attacks, so that's better, but a 4% chance, 96% of the time this doesn't happen. Chance to poison enemies. Inflicts 65% base damage plus 263 damage every second over 6 seconds, and decreasing movement speed by 24%. The poison spreads to nearby enemies if the victim dies. Cannot occur to the same target more often than once every 20 seconds, which don't worry about the cooldown because it only has a 4% chance of it even hitting. Ugh. I had this gem, I had a 4 out of 5 of it, completely sold it once Viper's Bite came out, because honestly, Viper's Bite is 2-star and does more consistent damage. If you were to track these on a, let's call it 10-minute chance, like a 10-minute damage thing, you're going to do more damage on the Viper's Bite than you would the Seeping Bile because of how consistent the damage is on Viper's Bite. This gem is shit. And like, people are going to roast me in the comments, and it's fine. It's my opinion, but like, it's not good. It's a 4% chance, and they came out with a 2-star legendary gem that's better than it. I could read this 3 or 5 times. The damage isn't high. It is over the 6 seconds, every second. So this damage is every second. I get that. The movement speed decrease is good, but again, 4% of the time it even happens. 96% of the time it's never going to happen. That's a problem, guys. And it's it's right next to Bloodsoaked Jade in terms of the most expensive gem on the market, which means in order to get it 5 out of 5 or even 2 out of 5, it's going to cost you max platinum. I don't. It lost value. They nerfed it with the change to the healing. So now that it doesn't interrupt your healing anymore in PvP, which was a massive part of it why everyone was running it. So in my opinion, it got nerfed for that. And it's 4% chance. It's a 4% chance. And then they came out with a 2-star legend gem that does it consistently, and this one's only a 4% chance. It's a D, guys. I can't, I've had people try to negotiate me with this and change my mind. It's a D gem. All right, moving on. Oh my, Starfire Shard. So when you deal damage, you have a 30% chance. Wow, 26% more than the Seeping Bile. Crazy. 30% chance to rain meteorites in an area, dealing 500% base damage plus 226 damage in total. Cannot occur more often than once every 20 seconds. The meteorites also scorch the ground for 2 seconds, burning enemies in the area and dealing 40% base damage every second. Now, I also thought it stunned. Unless they changed that, and I just don't remember reading that, I also thought it stunned. But even if it doesn't, this is tons of damage. So 40% base damage every second, which is insane. So 500% plus 2026. Bruh. Where's my calculator? So 263 times 6. Oops. I probably should have just left it at that. It'd probably still be lower. Times 6. 1,578 is how much damage just the base damage does over 6 seconds compared to the Starfire Shard. So it does 500 less damage, and this does 5,000%. So even if we did 60, what is it? 60 something? 65, knowing this is a percent, times 6. So it's 390% basically total damage compared to 500%. And this one only has a 4% chance, and this one has a 30% chance. It happens more often and does more damage. Starfire Shard is a phenomenal gem and deserves its spot in S tier in my opinion. This is a very, very, very good gem. There's a reason that it's mostly sold out on most people's servers now. Originally, this was one of the cheaper gems until people started utilizing it and getting it to higher levels and using it in PvP. And wow, it does a lot of damage in both PvP and PvE. So Winston's Haunting. Oops. I'm opening random things on my computer. Winston's Haunting is where? Right here. Another gem that I used to use. So when you defeat an enemy, a dark beast attacks nearby enemies, dealing 120% base damage plus 486 damage. Cannot occur more often than once every 6 seconds. You now have a 28% chance for an additional beast. So this is one of the ones that are usually pretty cheap because it's not that great. And it does require you to defeat an enemy. So from a PvP standpoint, it doesn't feel great because you have to beat someone and then you get the effect. But if you're in like a 1v1 situation where there's not a lot of people around, you don't get this benefit at all. And if you're in a situation where there's a bunch of people, it could be better, but again, the damage isn't all that amazing compared to some other ones. And then it's for PvE, it's good for farming, but nowadays you blow things up anyway really quickly, so you don't really see the benefit of this. I think it's one of those gems that needs a buff. Not everything they would, but it's not a good gem. I'm gonna put this in D tier right next to my good old friend Seeping Bile. I think the gem is too inconsistent. It does require you to beat something, and the damage isn't high enough, and it's not really good for PvP at all. But it is good for boosting your resonance because it's cheap, in case that's what you're going for. Moving on, Maw of the Deep, one of the new ones, baby. It's not even in here yet. All right, so Maw of the Deep at rank 5, level 5, rank 5, 3 out of 5 stars. Deals, and 32% upgrade progression. Increase resonance by whatever. Dealing damage conjures a whirlpool at the enemy's location that pulls nearby enemies to its center. After 2 seconds, a massive sea monster erupts from the whirlpool, dealing 240% damage plus 1,701 damage. Now again, this is half of the damage that it typically would be because this is not at rank 10. To all nearby enemies and knocking them airborne. It cannot occur more often than once every 20 seconds. The sea monster also destroys enemy armor for 6 seconds, increasing the damage they take from you by 12%, which is crazy. So it is CC, massive damage, consistent damage, because it's basically once every 20 seconds, because it's any amount of damage that triggers it. In PvP, this literally pops people up, and you can't really decrease how much it pops you up by, and then you also take additional damage, which allows people to catch up to you, jump on you, and kill you. And then in PvE, while the pop-up doesn't matter for bosses or anything like that, the damage alone, including the 12% additional damage, is a lot, and it's consistent. It's not a percent chance. It happens every 20 seconds, which is really, really good. So for that reason, let's go back over here. Whoops. If we go back to our tier list, I am a firm believer that Maw of the Deep is an S tier legendary gem. I think it is very, very good. I think it is basically required in PvP, and I think in PvE it really does, like I said, incredibly consistent good damage. Moving on to Spiteful Blood, which is at rank 10. At rank 10, increased resonant, whatever. All right, taking damage while below 50% life causes Spiteful Blood to surge through you for 4 seconds, increasing your damage done by 4% and making you invulnerable to primary attacks from other players. Spiteful Blood cannot trigger more often than once every 20 seconds. So it has a 16% down, a 16-second downtime in between that. So it's not bad considering it lasts for 4 seconds. But anytime you take damage while below 50% life, in PvP, this is insane. And the fact that it negates the primary attack, which is always going to be the most damage that any class basically does to you, is insane. This basically shuts down, as a ranged, in my case where I'm a wizard, this would basically shut down a barbarian from jumping on me or a demon hunter from just blowing me up, and it'll last for 4 seconds, which would allow me enough time to get out of whatever CC's in there and then teleport out, which would literally keep me alive, which is awesome. And it has a much lower cooldown, let's say Phoenix Ashes. So I think this gem is better than these two. I'm gonna go ahead and put it at A tier. It would be S tier if it had value in PvE, but it doesn't. But it is a really good gem in PvP. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it right there next to Ship of the Stone Flesh. Now we have the Void Spark. So Void Spark, last but not least, dealing damage conjures a Void Spark for 6 seconds. While the Void Spark is active, dealing damage has a 30% chance of unleashing lightning that chains to a maximum of 8 nearby enemies, dealing 45% base damage plus 446 damage to each enemy. Lightning Strike can only trigger once every 1 second. Conjure a Void Spark can only occur once every 20 seconds. There's a lot of if-thens, which is why I'm not the biggest fan of this gem. So dealing damage conjures a Void Spark. So that can happen once every 20 seconds, has a 14-second basically intermittent between the summoning of it, conjuring of it, and the cooldown, so 14 seconds. But then while it's active, there's a 30% chance. While the Void Spark is active, dealing damage has a 30% chance of unleashing the Lightning Strike. I don't love that. I wish they would just remove this part right here and basically make it where you just have it active for 6 seconds, and anytime you do damage, it does the spark. Because the damage itself isn't great. It does bounce to a lot of people, which is awesome. But it's just the 30% makes it not as good in my opinion. In some testing that I've never had this gem, but from testing that other content creators have done, it looks like this is more beneficial for melee than it is for range, which I could see. So for that reason, I think it's a good gem, but it's too many if-thens. This could go A or B for me. I'm gonna put it B because it's not good for all classes, and then the 30%, you know, I don't know, it could go A. I'll call this B plus or A minus. You can put it wherever you want. Oh gosh, let me read it one more time. Damage isn't great, but it does channel, which would be good for PvP, and then it could put dots. Yeah, you know, all right. I'll put it A tier for that reason. All right, so that is my tier list, guys, for all 5-star legendary gems. I think that this is, obviously, in my very biased opinion, a very good tier list, but I'm really curious what your comments are in the comment section below. Again, keep it civil, guys. We're going to disagree on some things, I guarantee it, but the one thing we don't need to disagree on is that Seeping Bile is terrible. Just kidding, kind of, it is bad. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and until next time, I'll see you in the next one.